If you're decided to motor west, you would take the highway that's the best. We're talking about Route 66 from Chicago to LA. And that's where we are right now, is on Route 66. Kind of, sort of midway between Chicago and LA here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. If you start on the east end of Albuquerque, you can travel 18 miles along old Route 66, which was the main street of Albuquerque, Central Avenue. And this is one of what many people regard as one of the most authentic stretches of Route 66. 18 miles of Route 66, and people anticipate coming to Albuquerque and experiencing, sort of being immersed in the real 66. Route 66 was established in 1926 by a fellow from Oklahoma named Cyrus Avery, and what he tried to do was knit a bunch of existing dirt roads together to make one single road from Chicago to Los Angeles. And so when he was looking at how to plot that route through New Mexico, he saw that about the only way he could make it happen in 1926 is to take the road to Santa Fe and then come back down to Albuquerque, because we had these mountains out here that kind of blocked access to Albuquerque from the east. So by 1937, they had blasted through the mountains, and Route 66 was coming down right through here, right out these windows here in 1937, and that's when this part of Albuquerque started to boom. In 1950, the population was about 96,000, and in 10 years after that, the population had doubled. This really, they call Route 66 the main street of America, and we're driving the main street of Albuquerque right here, and you can see how roadside businesses sprouted up to serve those tourists. The cafes, the motels, the trading posts, the rattlesnake pits. Route 66 served millions of travelers during its heyday, which was the 50s and 60s, but pretty soon it became almost too popular, and it started getting overcrowded and even unsafe. And Eisenhower, who was president at the time, realized maybe what America needed is a new highway system. And he envisioned an interstate system where you could drive from coast to coast and kind of bypass all the congestion you see in the cities that have grown up, because places like Route 66 had almost become too popular, clogged up. So the interstate system was established starting in 1958, and the interstate was completed along the southwest here, Interstate 40, in 1984. And so by 1985, Route 66 had been decommissioned and replaced by the interstate. And what happened is a lot of Route 66 towns were bypassed. They just became exits on the freeway, and many of them, business just came to a standstill. In the last section in Arizona, the business owners described like the night before, traffic was just crazy through the town, and then the day the interstate opened, you could lay down in the road. It was that dramatic.
When Route 66 was decommissioned, there was a big public effort along the road to look at ways to preserve and commemorate the road. And as part of this effort, the public turned to Congress essentially and said, this was a federal road, what can the federal government do in terms of preserving and commemorating this really important part of American history? What everybody seemed to be most comfortable with was establishing a program within the National Park Service of technical assistance and cost share grants. And so what we do is we work with communities all up and down the road, from Chicago to Santa Monica, in all of the 8 states, to look at ways to preserve and commemorate the special places and stories along the road.
We're in downtown Albuquerque right here, standing in front of one of the classic Route 66 movie theaters. Behind me is the Chemo movie theater, which in the Native American language means the king of its kind, Chemo. One of the striking features that really lights up downtown at night is this 23-foot tall neon sign on the front, the Chemo sign. Neon is real iconic on Route 66. I call it the street jewelry of Route 66. You have these ruby reds, these emerald greens, these sapphire blues, these pearl whites, and it's all wrapped in crystal. It's like jewelry. And neon like this is all over Route 66, from Illinois to California. And a lot of the preservation work now is going into preserving these great pieces of neon art.
Neon signs are really a folk art, and really expresses a lot of character in and of itself, just really like the road itself. I mean, Route 66 is characterized by having been a commercial corridor lined with independent mom and pops, each with their own personality and their own influence on the road. And the signs are really a reflection of that, the idiosyncrasy of the road, the unpredictability of the road, the color of the road.
What you see on a lot of these signs is it picks up, you know, the western and desert motif, which is, you know, what exemplifies the Southwest. So like if you're from Missouri or you're from Kansas, Illinois or Arkansas and you're making that trip west, you start seeing these images and it's exciting. On the right is another example of the building's gone, but the sign remains. And in this case, they turned the sign into a piece of art. They gave it to a group of artists, and that's what they came up with. It's a piece of Route 66 art. Well, here we are, folks, in room 23 at the fabulous El Don Motel. Up and down Route 66, there are hundreds and hundreds of these old Route 66 motels. And not all of them are going to remain as motels. There's just simply not enough business as there was back in the Route 66 days. The interstates have bypassed these main streets, so not all of these motels are really viable as motels.
Motels in particular are what we considered a very endangered property because first of all, they're not being built that way anymore. As these small, you know, L-shaped or U-shaped properties that may have 10 to 14 rooms that often can be very difficult to find a new use for to keep them economically viable.
Well, there's lots of creative things that are being done up and down Route 66 to preserve these icons and these landmarks. Some of these old motels are being turned into artist enclaves where artists gather and have studios, or they become sort of mini business parks, or they become, you know, sort of like retirement homes and things like that. There's a lot of kind of different ways these motels can evolve into something that's, you know, serves the communities better than being just an empty motel.
Over the years, the states have been doing tremendous work at focusing on Route 66 within their states, and I see that energy and momentum continuing within the communities and within the states, and also the states really working more together across state lines to be to bring the road back to a road instead of eight roads that are marked by, you know, the state that you pass through.